Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am here with my friend Trent Dunham of Dunham Company. Trent, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet, man.
So, if you could share with our audience a little bit about who you are and who Dunham Company is.
Sure. Well, Dunham and Company, let's start there. I think that's the easiest place to start. Dunham and Company started about almost 13 years ago now, with a real kind of dissatisfaction with the way that fundraising council have been serving nonprofits. It was really kind of a vendor-based model and focused on specific things like direct mail or very codified, focused initiatives that didn't really bring any integration to the organization. And so I think the best way to summarize it is that every organization, every nonprofit, every church is having some kind of impact. They could be having more impact. There's a gap between what is and what could be, and we exist to close that gap. Now, obviously, fund development plays a central role in closing that gap, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into fundraising besides out sending out a letter or even sending out an email. There has to be a good infrastructure. There has to be a good integrated strategy across channels, from social media to direct mail to your website to the way that you're communicating from the pulpit if you're a church to your major donor relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And so we just had a real passion to look holistically at the way that nonprofits and churches generate revenue in a meaningful way that not only helps accomplish the mission that God has put in their heart, but also allows them to bring the donor through that experience of what it means to give towards God's purposes and how that unlocks their heart to fully follow after God in a more meaningful way. So 13 years ago, we set out on that venture and really focus our work with three types of organizations: the local church, as it relates to their communications and fundraising, both with their congregation on an ongoing basis, capital campaigns and things like that, but also then with cause-related nonprofits, organizations that we've worked with like World Vision and Samaritan's Purse and Campus Crusade and others like it. And then media-based ministries. So a lot of churches who have used radio and television and the internet as a way to expand the reach of their message beyond their four walls. So we work with people like Rick Warren and Dr. Dobson and Jack Graham and Dr. Ed Young in Houston and Tony Evans and Chip Ingram and Beth Moore and all these other great communicators to help them with their strategy on how do we take that message to more people. And so in that, when you cut Dunham and Company, what we bleed is ministry effectiveness as it relates to development, so that at the end of the day, the organization has more net revenue to spend on what God has called them to accomplish. And so my role in particular in that is to oversee our operations in North America. We have an office in Dallas and we have one in Sydney, Australia, and we serve, 50 to 60 ministries around the world, including in Europe and South Africa and Singapore and China. And so I head up our specific initiative here in North America.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's been fun to get to know you as we've worked together on the Elevate Summit with Invictus. And I've got to know a little bit more of your team as well. And knowing that the people behind Dunham are even better than the product, and the things that you guys are doing and the things you're doing are tremendous. As we've jumped into the Elevate Summit, it's been fun to really get to serve some smaller churches. So you and I function very much in a mega church or mega ministry or nonprofit world, as we do some large scale, I guess, activities or consulting. But there's a need, obviously, with the 300,000 churches in our country, that with average church being 150 people. How do those principles that you're using for these large mega churches transfer to a smaller church? So if you could share a little bit, and so I've done that with social media, and as we each kind of have our role within the event, can you share your heart of why it is that you wanted to get involved in the Elevate Summit events with Invictus, and then what it is that you want to communicate to those churches?
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. And so often there's this disconnect that says, well, I saw this mega church do this fundraising campaign, or they interact with their congregation in this way or that way, and there's no way I could ever do that, so I can't be effective in that. And I think that's obviously the evil one putting a lie in our mind that just is not a reality. Like at the end of the day, there's so much transferable knowledge regardless. It's almost irrespective of size of your church. And what I have a passion for is that we teach giving the right way. And that is completely irrespective of the size of your church. Right theology around that and right approach and thinking as it relates to money is not only critical for leadership in the church, but for our congregation of people sitting in the pew every day. And then there are so many ways that we communicate with our constituents and with our congregation that we have to communicate with, whether we're big or we're small. And there are so many truths to the way that we develop relationships around an understanding of why it's important to give that are transferable regardless of size. That it's my passion that we unlock those for every church so that they can attain and achieve maximum impact to where God's called them in their specific area or their multiple sites or wherever God's called them to.
That's awesome. And so if you want to find out more about the Elevate Summit, you can visit elevatecsbc.com to learn more about that event and the message, that you'll hear from David Cooper and from Trent and from the whole team is really so practical and really understanding why and then how you execute these very practical principles. Trent, if you were to get in an elevator, with about 50 floors with a church or ministry leader, and you had 1 minute to really speak into them when it comes to giving, what would you communicate to them?
Sure. That's a great question. I think first of all, and I said it already, is that we've got to teach right theology about this. We oftentimes we teach the tithe because it's easy and the Bible says it, and then we just expect that our congregation is going to get it. And there's more to it than that. In fact, at the Elevate Summit, why I think my session in particular is so important is because we unpack what is that theology that undergirds right teaching around giving, and why is it important? Why is it important to the person sitting in the pew that they're engaged in giving? How does it honor God? But how does it move the heart of the believer to a deeper relationship with Jesus? At the end of the day, that's what we all want, right?
Right.
So I think that's the first bit I would say. The second bit is that there's a very practical way that we can go about implementing this. We have to talk about it with our congregation. If we don't talk about the needs of the church, it's not going to get done. So you got to talk about it. The third thing is we got to share results. We got to tell testimonies. We have to share the impact of the ministry we're having on an ongoing basis with the people who show up every day and every Sunday in our church. We have to get disciplined about doing that. And then finally, the last thing I would say is we have to execute and invest in those things that enable the giving experience to make sense and to be easy for our congregation. So whether that's technology, and there's very inexpensive technology that we can utilize to do that, or whether it's just making it the facility to give easy and logical for our congregation when they're actually in the building on a Sunday, those are the four things that I would say we've got to focus on and really pay attention to.
That's awesome. Well, you nailed that in 1 minute. I feel motivated and ready to go. And you and I both agree, especially on that technology piece, that
right.
It blows me away how many churches are not using online giving and maximizing that opportunity. But you're right. It's not just online giving is the opportunities, but even the opportunities on our campuses and everywhere else, and increasing those giving units and really helping our church, to grow as disciples through giving. So big opportunity, and I appreciate what you're doing, the ministry and work of Dunham Company. How can people get a hold of you, and how can they connect with Dunham Company?
So the best thing to do probably is just go to the website, dunhamandcompany.com. On there's a way to get in touch with us with the right person here who can actually direct you to the right way. What's cool about the site we try to do is we have a real desire to inform nonprofits and churches about what's happening in the industry, and we do a lot of research. And so there's a lot of research on the site that if you just have a question about, what is online giving? How's that performing? What does it look like as a percentage of total revenue for an organization on average? Am I hitting that bar? You can kind of search our research area and kind of look at some of those studies that'll help inform you. And maybe those are tools you can use with your board or your leadership team to help move people in a specific direction. So I'd encourage you to look at the site as the first starting point.
Great. And the other thing I want to encourage you to do is reach out to Trent on Twitter. And so whether Trent's using it every day or not, I'm going to pressure him into it now by sending you to @Trent_Dunham. And you connect with him there on Twitter. Trent, thanks for joining us. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this conversation.
All right.